Hi, Andrew, the Fulgor Milano guy here. The purpose of this video is to get you acquainted with the features and capabilities of the Sofia professional cooking appliances, in particular the dual fuel and induction top ranges, and the built-in professional oven, who all use the same electronic and will have the same feature capabilities in their ovens, in their electric ovens. This video should help you get the most out of your range. This will give you some tips for the use of all of the features of the oven, and we're going to go through the electronics and all the various cooking modes to show you all those different features and capabilities and how to access them. And on this electronic, we have your time displayed. We have the mode lit up, and that is corresponding to this knob here, which is your cooking mode selector. And then we have the word temp here lit up because this is your temperature adjustment knob. Across the bottom, we have 6 buttons that are touch sensitive. So we have menu, time, minus and plus, light, and preheat. So menu is typically if you're choosing various options or entering into options, you'll use that button. Time is for the various time functions of the appliance. Plus and minus is for making adjustments to the various settings. Light will turn on and off the oven light. And preheat is the fast preheat button. And we'll go into some more detail about that further on in the video. We also have some keyboard combinations that are highlighted here. One is lock, and that is the lock for the actual door. If you're baking something and you don't want curious eyes to be opening the door, you can lock it manually. And you also have the ability to do a keyboard lock with this keypad combination, which will make this no longer responsive, so somebody can't make inadvertent changes to the electronics. It doesn't have any effect on the operation or being able to change temperature or cooking modes. So we can demonstrate that now. Right now the door, I can open and close it. If I want to lock it, I hold these 2 keys for a couple of seconds, and you'll see it says lock user will be flashing. And as that's flashing, there is a mechanical cam that is rotating out, which will engage the door. And when it stops flashing, that tells us that the door is locked and we can no longer open it. So we can just as simply unlock it by the same 2 key combination. And the door is now unlocked again. Now we're going to spend a little time talking about time. So we're going to focus on the time button. When the unit is not being used, everything is turned off, you have 2 options under the time functionality. If I was to press time right now, you see timer. And timer is basically your countdown kitchen timer. If I was to press time, I see timer. I press time again, set time. This is where I can now set the current time of day. And it times out after a few seconds of no interaction. So let's go through the exercise of actually changing the time for the time of day. So I'll press time, set time. Now if I push either the plus or the minus, it will go into time adjustment mode. And again, without touching something, it will time out. So I can make adjustments with the plus minus. And if I want to switch to minutes, I press time again, and whatever's flashing is what can actually be adjusted. And I can let it time out. And the time will be locked in. So the other functionality of the time button when nothing is turned on is the timer. So again, I press the plus. This is hours. If I want to do a 1-minute timer, I switch it with time to go to minutes. I press 1 or plus to go to 1. And I leave it, and it starts to count down. So this will simply count down from whatever time you set it, hours, minutes, and then it will be a beeper. at the end. So once the timer is completed counting down, you'll get a beeper, and this will continue to run for several minutes, but you can also turn it off manually. So you can turn it off just by simply touching the time button, or if you're not using the oven to cook right now, you can turn it off simply by turning the oven on and back off again with the selector knob. That turns off the timer. Now, if I were to turn on a cooking mode, and you'll see there's a default temperature setting without even touching the temperature button. We have a default. This tells me that the unit is preheating, and as time goes on, you'll see there's a 4-segmented display on the side here that will tell you where it is in the preheat cycle. And at the end, when it gets to the 4th segment lit up, the beeper will go off telling you that it is preheated. While the oven is on, we have 2 additional time modes. So if we push time, you'll still see the timer, the standard countdown timer. If I push time again, I see time, and again, where I can set time. Then I have stop time, and again, set time for setting the clock. So we'll go back to the 2 new time ones. Time, in this case, if I was to set a 1-minute timer, which we will do, this is important for the customer to understand the functionality of the appliance in this case, because this isn't simply just a countdown timer, it's a countdown timer that will also turn the oven off when it is completed counting down. So there have been some customers who have inadvertently set the time instead of a timer when they're doing multiple batches of cookies, and then all of a sudden they realize that the last batch didn't cook all the way, and then they mistakenly think that the oven has turned itself off when in fact they set the time instead of the timer, and the oven shut off at the end of it. So we'll see that here when it gets to the end of the countdown. So it seems similar because the same timer or the same beep is going off at the end, but it's telling you here that it's end. So if you're not paying attention to that, you may not realize that the oven is turned off. So again, we can cancel that by pushing the time button, and will time itself out when we turn it back to off. Now, the other one we saw in there was stop time. We'll put it back to our chosen cooking mode, and we'll set to a lower temperature so we can see the segmented preheat display start to come up. But for this time mode here, let's say we know it's 12:56. Let's say we have a casserole, a frozen casserole that we want to put in the oven, and we want it to be ready for 6 o'clock. We're not going to be home, and it takes 2 hours to cook. So what we can do is start a delayed cooking cycle. So we'll set our temperature. We've chosen bake cooking mode, and let's say we're going to put it at 325, and then we're going to set the time. Remember, we said we're going to cook for 2 hours, and then we're going to set the stop time, and it automatically starts at 2 hours after the real time now, but I want this to be done for 6 o'clock, and we lock that in. And what you'll see when it times out is the oven turns off, delay comes up, and at 4 o'clock this oven will come on at 325 degrees and cook for 2 hours, and then turn itself off at 6 o'clock. If we want to cancel that, we just simply turn the oven off, and the whole mode is canceled. So those are the 4 different time functionalities through this electronics. Configuration wise, the customer can access configuration by holding the menu and time button for a couple of seconds. And then we get this sub menu or configuration menu. So here the customer can select the displayed degrees. So it can be Fahrenheit or Celsius. If we want to access that, we push the menu button. Now it's flashing, which means we can change it with the plus or minus. By default, it's degrees Fahrenheit, but we can change that to Celsius if we like, or back to Fahrenheit. We'll press menu to get back out, and to go to the next menu item, we press plus. Hour, this is where we can choose to show a 12-hour clock or a 24-hour clock. We'll leave it at 12. Move to the next one, offset. This is where, if you have some tried and true recipes and this is a new range for you, and you find that it's cooking a little bit hot or a little bit cool, this is where you can set an offset. So if we press menu, we can go anywhere from minus 35 degrees to plus 35 degrees as an offset. And so you can still use your standard temperature and set your temperatures normally for your recipe, and the offset will automatically shift the temperature a little bit higher or a little bit lower so that your recipe cooks the way that you are accustomed to. Sabbath mode, this is for the observation of religious holidays, the Sabbath. And to engage that, we would turn that on. And we hold the menu button. And at this point, we can only select the bake function. And after 5 minutes, Sabbath mode would turn on, and you would no longer be able to make any adjustments to the appliance. And the Sabbath mode will last up to 72 hours unless turned off manually. So also, beyond Sabbath is set. So you'll notice that when you choose a cooking mode, there's a default temperature that shows up in the display. By default, it will have some automatic preset temperatures in there for each individual cooking mode. If I push menu here, right now it's set to user. That's my own personal preference. If I press plus, it's auto or standard, and that's going to use the built-in factory preset temperatures for each cooking mode. If I leave it on user, what that does is remembers the last used temperature for each cooking mode. So if I'm always cooking at 375 on convection roast, every time I go back to convection roast, it'll default to 375 without me having to make any adjustment with the temperature knob. So those are all the things that you can do in the configuration menu. If we want to get out of it, we just hold the menu button for about 3 seconds, and then it cancels out of it. The various cooking modes that are available are true Euro convection, and this is using the ring elements. Oh, I think so here's what's happening is it's not going into any cooking mode except bake, because I've got the Sabbath mode turned on. So we're going to have to go back in and turn off the Sabbath mode so that I can use the other cooking modes. So turn that off, and we'll time out. Now we can go in and demonstrate all the various cooking modes. So first cooking mode is convection, multi-convection bake. And multi-convection bake refers to if you want to cook on all 3 racks that are in the oven, say you're doing 3 pizzas or 3 trays of cookies, this is the mode you want to use. It's not using any broiler heat, it's not using the bake element heat, it's only using the ring elements around the individual convection fans. So you have 2 convection fans rotating in opposite direction, cycling air around inside the cavity, ensuring that you have an even heat distribution throughout. Thus, when you're cooking your cookies or baking your cookies, you don't have to halfway through switch your trays from one rack to the other. You don't have to pull them out and turn them around so that the front goes to the back. This will allow for true even cooking at all levels throughout the surface area. And you can see now we're getting up to 2 segments of preheat. Next is going to be convection broil. So with convection broil, this is a fan assist. You're only using the heat from the broil element, but you have the ability to actually configure the temperature as well, but only having heat coming from the broil element. You'll see the default for that is 450. Next cooking mode is convection roast. This is if you're going to do an actual roast or a chicken and you're cooking on one level. So you're using the fans for heat distribution, for evenness inside the cavity, but your temperature or your heat is actually coming from the broil and the bake elements. So you're actually going to get radiant heat as well. So this is great for browning and caramelizing of your dishes. Multi-pizza. This mode is only using the bake element and the fans to assist. So if you're cooking those thin crust margherita pizzas and you want just the heat source coming from the bottom, just like in a bake oven, or pizza bake oven, you have a heat source from the bottom or a pizza stone or something like that, but then you also have convection heat on top to melt the cheese and cook the veggies and things like that and help the crust rise. Then we have bake mode. So bake mode is actually using the concealed bake burner and the broil burner, both of which are 8-pass burners, but you're not using convection fans anymore. So you're just using the radiant heat like in a traditional oven that doesn't have convection. And you have broil. So broil is a little bit different because you can see now instead of a temperature we have an L or a level 3. So by default the level is 3, and we can go anywhere from L1 to L2, L3, L4 up to L5, where L5 is 100% on. The broil is on 100% of the time. And then as we go down to L4, L3, we're going to 80% on, 20% off, 60% on, 40% off. So turning the broil element on and off so it's not as intense, but still your heat source is coming from the broil element. And not finally, but the last cooking mode or warming is actually a warming mode. So in the warming mode, we actually have 4 different modes. Right now, it always remembers the last one used. So warm plus, in this case, goes from 130 degrees Fahrenheit up to 210 degrees Fahrenheit. So this is where you want to be keeping a meal warm, let's say, at serving temperature. If we want to go to the next warming mode, we press the menu button. Then we get dehydrate. Dehydrate is now using heat and convection, just mild heat, anywhere between 120 to 160, and the convection fans if you want to dehydrate, I don't know, beef jerky or different fruits. Pressing menu again, we get to convection. So there's no temperature being used, only the fans are running, and this is to help defrost. So if you forgot to take something out of the freezer and you want to defrost it quicker than normal, but not use the microwave or anything like that, you can take that chicken or meat or whatever, put it on a metal pan and put it in the oven, and then run the convection. And this runs room temperature air around and quickens the thawing out of the food. And then the last warming mode is actually just warm. So that you're going to use this if you're proofing dough. You can go anywhere from 80 degrees Fahrenheit up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. So those are the 4 different warming modes. The last mode is self-clean, and you would turn the control knob or the cooking mode to clean. You turn the temperature knob to clean. And the default setting from the factory is 3 hours, but the user does have the ability to go down as low as 2 hours or as high as 4 hours on the self-clean cycle. And as you can see, this is flashing at the same time. The auto lock, it's locking the door for safety, but even still, the glass of the door will stay safe enough to touch, cool enough temperature to touch. The other thing I want to mention is that anytime a cooking mode has been chosen, you will feel air coming out between the console and the door. And this is the cooling fan that keeps the electronics and everything at a safe temperature internally. When we are done cooking, once the cavity has been heated up, when we are done cooking, you may find, or you will find, that that fan will continue to run even after the oven has been turned off, to continue to exhaust warm air and temperature from internally from the oven until it gets down to a certain threshold, and then the fan will turn off automatically. So the last feature that I want to talk about is the fast preheat. So if I was to choose a cooking mode, in this case we're going to choose bake, and so bake is not using any convection fans, it's just using the upper and lower element. But if I wanted to speed up the preheat, right, the preheat might be taking too long, or I don't have patience, or I want to heat it up more quickly, what you can do is press the preheat button on the right, and you'll see the word fast come up, and you may have heard a relay click on there and a little hum coming on. What that's doing is, no matter what cooking mode I've chosen, when I choose fast preheat, it turns on the convection fans and the convection ring elements and engages, there's an auxiliary broil element around the outside of the main broil element that comes on to give additional heat, to very quickly heat up the internal cavity temperature. Once it achieves the preheat temperature, it will, let's see if we can get one low enough. 225, looks like it's already there. Once it's achieved preheat temperature, we'll hear a beep, and then the fans will turn themselves off and we'll go back to the regular chosen cooking mode, which in this case isn't using the convection fans. So let's wait for that to happen. So that's the preheat indicator telling us that we're fully heated. The fast preheat is turned off. So now the convection fans have turned off and it's returned to its regular chosen cooking mode.